Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the final event of this current series. And what a series it's been. I'd like to thank Louis Stauburn for all his hard work, providing our audience with an exceptional program. Our next series will be in April. An exciting group has been lined up, so stay tuned for details on the upcoming Shore Bulletin. Couple of things. First of all, if anyone has any questions, please enter them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. And if anyone who's missed an event, that tomorrow we will be sending out recordings of all the events for this session to anyone who has registered for an event and couldn't make it. As well, they will be posted on the Shore online bulletin. Jacques Shore, a Shore member, will be interviewing Calin Rovinescu, CEO of Air Canada. Jacques is a partner in Calin Rovinescu's Ottawa office. He practices in the field of administrative law, federal regulating affairs, and trade negotiations. He's an advisor to numerous Canadian and international companies, as well as not-for-profit corporations and NGOs. He's heavily involved, and I know that personally, in community work. He was past chair of the Board of Governors of Carleton University. He is a published author of many articles on legal issues and public policy, and most important of all, he has written several children's books. He received the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for dedicated service to Canada. The list of his achievements go on and on and on. Jacques will be in conversation with an esteemed Canadian, Calin Rovinescu, CEO of Air Canada. So without further ado, I present Jacques Shore to you.
Thank you, Mark, for your kind introduction. Good evening, friends and Shore family. I say Shore family because I feel so close to the Shore, and some of my best memories growing up come directly from my extensive ties to the synagogue, and many of you who are participating with us this evening. My formative years included special moments sitting in the main sanctuary next to my father Sigmund during our prayers and glancing at my mother Lena across the aisle. My brother Michel and I feel so incredibly blessed to have developed our foundation within the Shore. It is heartwarming for me and Donna to know that our daughter Emily and nephew Lorne are on the Shore board. With that, I begin. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's conversation with Calin Rovinescu, President and CEO of Air Canada. It is an enormous pleasure and privilege to be in conversation with this great and exceptionally fine and thoughtful gentleman. I begin by sharing some highlights of Calin's outstanding professional career. Also extra special for me to do this with you because I guess I fell when speaking of Calin's contribution to Canadian business and beyond. Many of you know my close relationship with Calin. We met each other on our first day of law school 45 years ago. So this does give you a sense of our growing family's friendship. Calin's remarkable story began in Romania, where he was born and lived until he and his family came to Canada when he was 5 years old. They came to Canada without much more than a few suitcases of clothes, $60, and his parents, Ionel and Adriana's education, and their will to do all they could for their two children, Calin and Olivia. This early experience was no doubt important in Calin's development. Calin trained as a lawyer after doing his cégep at McGill, his civil law at l'Université de Montréal, and common law at University of Ottawa. He has also been awarded 6 honorary doctorates from universities in Canada, the United States, and Romania, and is the current chancellor at the University of Ottawa. Calin quickly started climbing the ranks at Stikeman Elliott in Montreal, eventually becoming its youngest managing partner after spending several successful years running Stikeman's office in London, England. It was during his over 20 years of practice in corporate finance and business law that Calin started advising and working with Air Canada. initially on its privatization and public offerings in the late 80s. Important to remember that Air Canada wasn't always the world-renowned company that it is today. It started as a staid Crown corporation, and over the past 2 decades, Air Canada survived several dramatic restructurings that threatened its very existence. The fact that it has not only survived, but has become a symbol of pride and success for Canada is largely a testament to Calin's leadership and perseverance, or as the Financial Post put it in 2014, Calin Rovinescu saved Air Canada. During the tumultuous times post 9/11, many of you may remember Calin as the airline chief restructuring officer, helping to stabilize Air Canada and its setup for future success. Calin then left to co-found the investment bank Genuity Capital Markets in 2005 that subsequently became one of Canada's leading investment banks before emerging successfully in 2010 with Canaccord Group. Calin was catapulted, though, back to Air Canada in 2009, right after the global financial crisis, this time as CEO, ready to engineer another turnaround. A miracle was required, and Calin was already recognized as a miracle worker. Major issues involved massive debt, a high cost structure, depleted cash reserves, labor unrest, and a pension shortfall of $4 billion. Within 2 years, the labor issues had been worked out, the pension plan was in surplus, and a new carrier, Rouge, was up and running as a lower cost option. This dramatic change led to Calin being awarded CEO of the Year by the Globe and Mail's Report on Business in 2013, and then again in 2019, the only recipient to win twice. Well, I was thrilled but not surprised to see this incredibly well-deserved recognition. Calin has won many other awards for his leadership, including Financial Post's CEO of the Year for 2016, Companion to the Business Hall of Fame, Global Executive Leadership Award by Flight Global, and many other tourism and aviation awards. Calin's dedication to giving back to the community is at least as impressive as his business career. His efforts in spearheading humanitarian relief after several natural disasters were recognized with the Order of Canada in 2018. Now, Calin and his wife Elaine also founded a scholarship at his alma maters, the University of Montreal and Université de Montréal, for first-generation Canadians, once again demonstrating his commitment to education and remembering those sensitive moments of being an immigrant in a new and distant land. A few months ago, Calin announced that he would be retiring from his role leading Air Canada this upcoming February. Yet even in retirement, it seems that Calin will not be stepping back from business entirely and will be serving on the boards of directors of BC Bell Canada and Scotiabank. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming my great friend, Calin Rovinescu.
Thank you very much, Jacques. First of all, it's fantastic to be here and have a chance to talk with you. But that was, I mean, I think I'm going to have to hire you as my publicist for my next life. Yeah. That was a great introduction. Thank you very, very much.
Well, listen, I only wish we'd be sitting together in person. That would be nice. But we're so glad to have this opportunity. So, you know, Calin, I could have gone on and on. It was tough to do that. Keeping something in 5 minutes on you is not easy. And there's so many amazing memories that we have together. But I want to begin because I know you have so many different lessons to share and lots of thoughts. But I'd like to begin with the formative years. I mean, looking back at your career, Calin, let's start with your days as a lawyer and what drew you to law, ultimately to our profession.
I think back and we often find great opportunities when seminal moments occur, like my having been appointed as CEO at Air Canada, or my retirement from Air Canada, or when I became managing partner at Stikeman Elliott, leaving for Genuity. Any of those that connect the dots and you look back to that legal career. I really do believe that the expression that is used often in French, le droit mène à tout, law leads to everything. The reality is that it is a fantastic foundation for so many different things. And so when I look at my daily life at Air Canada for the last decade, all of the various tools of the trade that I had, that I acquired during those early years of law school and then practicing law were extraordinarily helpful. And so, it's the advice I've given my kids. It's the advice that I give many, many young people. When you have an opportunity to do it and you're interested in pursuing it, even if you never practice law for one day, it is such a fantastic foundation. And it encourages excellence, fantastic discipline, precision, commitment. You aren't spooked in terms of reading complicated documents. It just gives you an extra edge, and it's been one of the great bases for lots of other things in my life after that. So I think back to those early years when I went into law school like so many other kids, thinking that I'd come out and practice criminal law. But of course, that was the furthest thing from what it was that I was exposed to. And then, very quickly thereafter, the exposure through Stikeman Elliott to business law and taxation, corporate restructurings, mergers and acquisitions, and so on and so forth. And that became, our daily life. And we became key advisors to so many people in the business community. So, law is a fantastic training ground. And for those, people listening, whether they're students, parents, folks thinking about their kids, it is a very, very rich and broad basis to do lots and lots and lots of different things. And we look at our political leaders, so many of our political leaders are our business leaders, people running universities have had background in law. So big fan of that. My father, and we'll talk undoubtedly about my parents in a bit, but my father, who was a doctor, would have preferred for me to frankly go into medical school. And it was a big disappointment for him that I chose law school. And he encouraged me at one point to actually make the jump, because I think he was concerned when I was studying political science that I'd be in political science for the rest of my days or something like that. And he said, what exactly do you do with political science? Are you going to open up a political science store? So he actually at the end encouraged me, but his first preference would have been for me to go into medical school. And I think that, that probably was one of the big disappointments of his life.
Thank you. Well, your father was a wonderful man, and I have such beautiful memories of him and your mother. So let me just, go from there, because I think that's so natural. Dr. Calin Rovinescu was truly someone who was very special, incredibly devoted to you and to Olivia and all the family. I mean, it was just remarkable, as was your mother, Adriana. I mean, how aside from that, what was it that you felt they gave you that enabled you to do some of what you ended up doing? Again, like from the start.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your remarks, Jack, and that was very generously recognized that they came with basically nothing, $60 or thereabouts, and a few suitcases of clothes, and that was it basically. And that, the courage that they had to leave a reasonably comfortable existence, albeit one that had enormous limitations because they were living in a communist regime in Romania, where there was rampant anti-Semitism and restrictions on what my father as a surgeon, he was a urologist, as a surgeon could do, how far he could progress, and whether his children could have education. In other words, there was a very strict policy at that stage against the education of intellectuals who were Jewish. And so that was a big problem for him, the fear that my sister and I wouldn't have an education, because for him, education was the number one thing in life. And that has been an underpinning of so much that has influenced my life. And we'll talk a little bit maybe afterwards about the decisions that Elaine and I have made about first generation Canadians. But sure, that was a big step. And when they came to Canada with nothing, I didn't realize that we had nothing. We lived on Barclay Street, and for those that know Montreal a little bit, Barclay Street is certainly in 1960. And probably it's not much better today, was not exactly high living as far as Montreal was concerned. And that was, we had a comfortable life, and I was very pleased, but I didn't realize we had nothing. And it's only recently that I actually started seeing the word refugee ascribed to their departure from Romania. Mm-hmm. This was almost a gift that came out in the last several years through an investigation that Elaine did through Pier 21 in Halifax, the Immigration Museum.
Yeah.
And we discovered a lot of things that had been written, how they came to Canada, what type of support they had from JIAS, who basically gave them, basics of life, for the first few months, until they got jobs. My father wanted to practice medicine, so he went back to redo his residency and to be recertified in Canada. And my mother, who had 2 master's degrees and was highly educated and spoke English and French very, very well, and was involved with cultural relations between Romania and China when she was in Romania, had no other choice but to do relatively menial work. She was working as a clerk at Simpsons, basically. And that commitment, living on Barclay Street, my father redoing his residency, my mother working at Simpsons, despite their very, very impressive education they had coming here, was, I would say, an extraordinary grounding for what I would characterize as the immigrant mindset, which is that you work hard, you take nothing for granted, and then you sort of seek to achieve better than anyone else. And I think that has been a driving force. It was ingrained in us, and my sister and I, ingrained in us to work hard and to want to win, want to succeed. And that is something that, certainly their sacrifice that they made led to a lot of that. And that commitment is something that I think will reside well with me and with my kids, and hopefully with our grandchildren. Because obviously as generation goes to generation, you don't see that commitment and that sacrifice, firsthand. One of the great gifts that came out of this Pier 21 discovery, and therefore starting to retrace documents, and then our daughter Laura put it into a great book, was a document that showed that when their first conversation with JIAS, for those that aren't aware what JIAS is, Jewish Immigrant Aid Services, which now is part of a broader aid group. And the conversation, they said, "Do you need some money?" And my father had said, no, we don't need any money, but maybe some clothes for the kids. Like, they had no clothes, right?
Incredible.
And that was quite shocking to me to read that. And that was in sort of formal documentation. I'd encourage those that are children of immigrants to search in this Pier 21 richness and to get documentation through some of these services, because there's a lot of material back there, including in our case, correspondence between our uncle who was in Canada, who was seeking to bring us over, and correspondence between him and the Minister of Immigration at the time. So tremendous influence, really the work ethic, level of commitment, the fact that the stars are totally reachable, in this day when we know that Jupiter and Saturn are aligning, for those that are following astronomy, that you could actually reach up and touch the sky and touch the stars. That was entirely possible. And so, that was a significant lesson that we had from them.
So beautifully put, Calin, and so appropriate for someone who deals with flight to make references to the alignment of Jupiter and Saturn as well. And I have to say, I know the story, and how grateful I am, and how grateful so many are that it was your mother's uncle that had that influence, be able to bring you, and just so that Canada would be your home. And look at how we're the beneficiaries of that. And it's true, when I think about Pier 21, what an amazing treasure trove that is. And as we have this connection, you and I never take anything for granted, Calin. I know that. And as first generation, as I'm a first generation Canadian. So let me ask you then, and I appreciate that. And then once you're here and you were practicing law, and boy, I remember how hard you were working at Stikeman, and you were involved in the big deals. Many of them were also the movie, those really incredibly film financing deals, all of that. So you certainly had tremendous experience. But then somehow there were other mentors that influenced you. And so I'd like to hear a little bit about that. And one of them I hope you touch on is going to be Claude Taylor, who was a CEO in the 80s and at Air Canada, who I felt really left a very special impression with you too.
Yeah, no, thank you. For me, and I've often spoken about this, and I can't underscore the importance of it for virtually any field anywhere, both being a recipient of mentorship and someone who dispenses mentorship. And for me, I had 3 or 4 senior partners at Stikeman Elliott who were unbelievably generous. And again, recognize that I was not a typical, and certainly in those days when I started working at Stikeman Elliott in 1978 as a student, and certainly in 1978, there were not a lot of other people who had my background or my name, to be very blunt, right? I mean, that was, it was either a WASP firm or a French firm. And you had 1 or 2, perhaps Jewish firms, but none, like an immigrant from Romania. So this is something that, when I look back now, I see the generosity of that law firm with not only exposing me to lots of amazing things, but then giving me the authority and the responsibility to do what was needed to be done. And so, it's always dangerous when you start naming people, but I'll name some of the names that are undoubtedly known to a lot of the people on this call. Stanley Hart, the late Stanley Hart, one of the brilliant lawyers of his era. Somebody who also had a great career in the public service. He was Deputy Minister of Finance. He was Prime Minister Mulroney's chief of staff. He was the CEO of, subsequently the CEO of Citibank in Canada, Solomon Brothers, and a few others. Stanley was a key partner and a key mentor to me. And indeed, he was the one who exposed me to the film deals. And I would say that the film deals, again, under this philosophy of connecting dots, which again, I'd encourage lots of people to do as they look at their lives, that the exposure to those complicated entrepreneurial film deals where you kind of had to put things together in real time was a very good training ground for a lot of the crises that I subsequently had to look at. So Stanley Hart, another, again, who sadly passed away this year, Sonny Gordon, again, known by many of the people here. Sonny, there was no better person to work a room, to do business development, to understand kind of who is doing what to whom in any corner of the universe. One of the most charming, people that you ever want to meet. And he was an extremely important mentor. Jim Grant, who was at that time the chairman of the firm, basically gave me probably the most important opportunities. He was the one who encouraged me at 28 years old or whatever it was to get involved with Air Canada, to be the lead counsel on its privatization. And then Senator David Angus, who again is well known by many, who has a lot of stories to tell, is somebody who's extremely comfortable in both the private and public sector, and well known in the UK, and all these 4 diverse backgrounds, different things. But the most important thing, in those days, we didn't have mentorship programs. You didn't have anyone who was responsible for you. It was largely a philosophy of sink or swim, which was fine with me. But the part that they gave me, which stayed to today, is the importance that I take in terms of mentorship in a broader sense. And that goes to empowering others. And that's, if there's one thing that I'm extremely proud of as I look at Air Canada, and as I looked at my time at Stikeman Elliott and at Genuity as well, it's the empowerment of folks in the next generation, the people that you pass the baton to for leadership. Those 4 passed it on to me. And I certainly viewed that throughout my life in almost every conversation, every discussion, anything that I do, including with very senior executives at Air Canada. And part of my, I'd say the last year has been spent focusing on exactly how that leadership team will look, the day that I retire. And so, the early lessons you take in seeing what others do. You mentioned Claude Taylor, and definitely 2 other people that need to be mentioned are Claude Taylor and Robert Milton, both of whom have had different influences in my life, and both of whom are connected with Air Canada. Claude Taylor, indeed, was the CEO and was the chairman, in fact, of Air Canada at the time of the privatization. He was no longer CEO the actual year of privatization. Yeah. He was the chairman, but he was an amazing mentor to me. And again, only discovered that with the passage of time. And here I was 28, 29 years old, occasionally would meet with him. I'd be nervously preparing my notes as I'd be called in with him. He'd be listening to me as if I was the only person on the planet. with the view of whatever it was that I'm telling him. It's so important, given that I'm bringing that perspective from the outside, as opposed to advice that he might otherwise be getting from the inside. That my perspective was fresh, was different, was coming from a different generation, and he really, empowered me as an outside advisor in a way that was almost unheard of. When the first phase of the privatization was over in 1988, 87 or 88, he called me to a one-on-one lunch at the Mount Royal Club. And the only way I could describe that is that that was some form of a secret handshake, that it was, one-on-one. He took out a little notepad from his, and he said, okay, you've worked with all of our teams, you've worked with our HR team, you've worked with our legal team, you've worked with our finance team. So give me some observations as to what we need to do, what we need to be thinking differently about, making our way through the private sector. And I remember being a little bit intimidated by that process, but it was a very empowering process, and one, of course, that I will always, always, always remember. And then, of course, the great irony was that when 30 years later, when I became CEO, he also called me up, and at this point he was 80 something. Sadly, he has since also passed away. And we went out for another lunch. This time I paid, but he took out his little notepad and he said, as you're coming into this, he was struggling to speak. He had at that stage, it was the beginning of some level of dementia, and starting to ask me a few questions about the future of the airline and kind of how I was going to tackle a few things. He had his notes on a notepad as to the questions he was going to ask me. So it's one of those great stories, which is that empowering somebody. Maybe he didn't realize it, and I certainly didn't realize it. But what he did on that day in 1988 was, commit me and engage me to Air Canada in a way that probably would never have otherwise occurred, and probably gave me my first interview as the CEO of Air Canada through that lunch. The other one is Robert Milton. Let me just
stop you there for 1 sec, because I want to say that I know how much you meant to Claude Taylor as well, because I know you spoke beautifully at his funeral, and that's how close he felt that the family wanted you to speak there.
Yeah, no, I was indeed honored to speak at his funeral, which was very intimate event, and whenever that occurs, I take that sort of stuff quite seriously, and I was indeed honored to do that. I do need to mention Robert Milton, who I'm sure many of you know as the CEO of Air Canada, during some very tumultuous times, 9/11, the restructuring in 2003, SARS, and then coming out of the restructuring, formation of ACE and all that. Robert was the person who frankly at that stage encouraged me to come to Air Canada as a senior executive. He and I fought side by side on the hostile takeover bid by Onyx and American Airlines in 1999, and really, he was the one. If you sort of again connect the dots, he was directly the one who exposed me and gave me the opportunities to, coming in from outside the industry, albeit an advisor to the industry, and catapulting me in a role that potentially was beyond my comfort zone, showed a tremendous amount of confidence. So when I come back to this notion of mentorship, I need to underscore that mentorship doesn't mean babysitting, right? Mentorship does not mean babysitting, does not only mean, let's go on mountain climbing or, rock climbing and, expeditions, whitewater rafting and so on and so forth. That's not what mentorship is. Mentorship is having the confidence, taking someone outside their comfort zone, pushing them to beyond what it is that they expected to be able to do, and empowering them to do that. And I think that each of these people in their own way did that for me. And for me, I've taken it as a responsibility to do that with lots of others.
That's incredible. That's a great way to put it, which actually then moves on to a subject that I know that you just emulate, and it's leadership. I mean, there's so many wide-ranging experiences that you've had in business, and it's shined through. This is shined through, I have to describe, through all economic seasons. So what did they teach you about leadership? And I see you, I see how you react and how you are with your team. I see some of that you're just talking about right now. But on leadership, your thoughts?
Look, leadership, I've been fortunate in a way because the leadership opportunities that I've been exposed to have been extreme, often through extreme crisis, and the extreme crisis dynamic, the so-called burning platform, is a phenomenal base for transformational leadership. Now, there are many different kinds of leadership, but the one that I guess, most comfortable to talk about is transformational leadership. What is it that you do when you transform something, whether it's something that was broken into something that is no longer broken, or whether it's something that is small into something that is bigger? And there are lots and lots and lots of examples of this type of leadership. As opposed to, say, someone who starts a company in their garage and then builds it into an amazing company. Different kind of leadership. But in my exposure, my experience with a complicated organization that is often on the front pages of to the extent pages still existed, but of course sort of speaking metaphorically these days. But that's often a media target. It's everything that you do is in the public eye, and so as we look at balancing stakeholders, we did take away a lot of very, very clear transformational leadership lessons. And I'd say the number one is to recognize that a burning platform is a great opportunity for growth, and out of adversity can come very, very significant strength. And so we've always operated like that, throughout all the various crises that I've led. It's not pleasant to be in that, and we certainly are living the mother of all crises now. And maybe we'll talk about COVID if we have time afterwards. But this is a crisis that is a factor of 10 or 100 of 9/11, SARS, the global financial crisis, the restructuring. There's nothing that compares to this, because it's global, it's catastrophic, it's long-lasting in duration. And so all of the lessons we took from those other crises helped us survive thus far this year without any sector support from the government at all. And we're one of the only, I think we're the only country, certainly we're the only country of the G7 and of the G20 that has received no support from the government. But we've survived, and we're taking steps to come out the other side nonetheless strong. So there are a few lessons. I'd say one, we've invested in being globally audacious. In other words, that it's okay to have big aspirations, and global audacity is something that enabled us to grow and to touch all inhabited continents of the world over the last decade. We've looked at encouraging the retention of talent. We've recognized that there's a global war for talent, and whether that means frontline talent, pilots, and so on, or whether it means head office and leadership talent. That's been a big part of our leadership strategy. We've invested a lot in diversity. There's something like 26 languages spoken at Air Canada, and we have one of the largest diverse population groups amongst our employees, based on the fact that we serve so many different countries, and so we've got so many visible minorities. That's been a big part of our investment. We've invested in long term. A lot of publicly traded companies like ours, we certainly wanted to do well in the stock market, and our company did better than any company for the decade from 2010 to 2020. Number one on the TSX. But our view was building long-term value for all of our stakeholders. And that meant our employees, that meant changing our culture to ensure that our leadership stays in place, meant dealing with our pensioners and dealing with that pension solvency deficit that you referenced, dealing with our passengers and building a customer dynamic that serves those that are prepared to pay a premium in business class, and those that are looking for a lower cost alternative with offerings like Rouge. And so the idea being long-term and taking care of of all of our stakeholders, true sustainability, if you like, as opposed to the words sustainability that is somewhat hijacked, I would say, these days. And having a consistent message. A lot of companies, a lot of leadership teams are all over the map. They come up with, let's have, this year's business plan will be different than last year's business plan, different than the business plan of the year before. And our view was that we were going to identify the things that really matter for a generation, for 10 years. We think about things in 10 years, and we're going to stick with it. Maybe we'll modify some aspects of it, but we stick with that. And then we communicate, and the communication over and over and over and over. And even if you think you've communicate it again and again. We have 36,000 employees, or we did until COVID hit. 36,000 employees. We carried 50 million people. We were doing $20 billion a year of business. So these are big numbers, and they affect a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different countries. And so consistency of message is extremely important. And we always, despite the size, we always had the objective of creating a culture of family. And that is the way so many of our people feel about Air Canada. And if ever I needed evidence of that, it's the way so many of them have reached out to me on the announcement of my retirement. And I think that, to me, is also a signal that we've accomplished the mission that we set out to do, which is, the number one thing, the number one asset that the company has to have going forward, especially coming out of COVID, is that strong culture and that strong desire to survive.
Yeah, well, that's so true, because I think I've told you many occasions, the ticket agents that know that I know you, or the flight attendants, they say, please tell Calin this. And look, even on a couple of occasions, I've received emails which I forwarded to you so that you are aware of them. And you certainly answered every one of those that came through me, so that because you certainly appreciated what they were doing for the airline. And I guess that is what really brought you back, and that's what has kept you bringing back and kept you there as coming up to 12 years as CEO. So it's incredible. It really is. I'm gonna want to jump to something else just briefly, because we could certainly speak so much about Air Canada and so many elements. And you're right, I do want to hear a little bit about the future in the context of what we're dealing with now in COVID and what that means. But I want to talk a little bit about what you did with regard to flights between Canada and Israel. And you've traveled to Israel on several occasions. I know that you've played a role there with the various ambassadors. I want to know what your impressions were and what you now feel in terms of the context of what Air Canada has done and what you see going forward.
So first of all, in this realm of the connecting the dots mindset, you should know that when we left Romania, and you said I left when I was 5 years old, we were in Austria, in Vienna, for several months as my parents were waiting for right. Approval to enter one country or another, and it was Israel was one of the possibilities, and frankly the likely direction was Israel. There was Canada and there was the United States, basically, and sort of hoping that one of those would actually accept them. So Israel was, interestingly enough, sort of in the cards, from way back when, and so it's a sort of a unique sense as to what a special place it is. And when we landed, there's certain places that we've Elaine and I have traveled almost everywhere in the world. And, I would say that when we landed in Israel, it was one of those very, very special places, the first time that we went there together. And that same sense, by the way, we had when we went into Romania after the way my parents left, sort of with nothing. And the first time we came back there, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that after. But Israel is indeed a special place. There's no question that it's a unique sense of that you're in a special place, whether it's the dynamic around the startup nation mindset, all the incredible amount of talent and technology expertise that exists there, the artificial intelligence dynamic, or the spiritual side, the sort of sense you have that you're in a place of feeling at home. And so both, the first time we went, we had that sensation. The second time I went there, I was fortunate enough to accompany Prime Minister Harper's delegation. And then the third time we went in the last few years was shortly before we expanded our services. I know a lot of the folks on this call are those who've encouraged us to have a direct service from Montreal. But the last time we went there, we brought friends of ours who are Christian who had never visited Israel. And to me, and I know that there's others who do this. I know Stephen Bronfman and Mitch Garber bring people who are Christians who've not been to Israel before every year, or did. Undoubtedly, they didn't do it this year, but it's a great blessing to do that, and it's a great privilege to see it through their eyes as well. And they were incredibly impressed, not only by the current dynamic that exists in Israel, but this almost unbelievable richness of history, and some of the stories that exist that are both in terms of ancient history and recent history. Really a remarkable thing. So I was very proud that I was there as we were expanding our service to Israel. For those that go there all the time, some of you may know our general manager for Israel is a dynamic lady by the name of Ruth Ben-Zur, who pushed us and pushed us and pushed us and nagged us and harassed us to expand service and to change the aircraft, because we had an aircraft there that had payload restrictions and was very, I think it was 330 that had an Airbus 330 before we had the 787, the Dreamliner on that route from Toronto I'm talking about. And as it turned out, the Dreamliner, which was of course the number one aircraft in our fleet right now, was the first flight we had it on was Tel Aviv. And that was sort of nothing to do with me, to be frank, in terms of my connection to it, but it was a symbolic importance of how we felt about it. And then, of course, a few years ago, we expanded service from Montreal, and I hope we'll be able to continue that service in this post-COVID environment. And I've had the privilege of being recognized and spent some time with the B'nai B'rith, the folks who did the B'nai B'rith event a few years ago, and some of the projects that they're doing, very, very important projects involving seniors who can't afford housing in Montreal and in Toronto. Great organization as far as I'm concerned. Hebrew University had invited me to be the co-chair of their event in Montreal on the Einstein Millennium Project. It was the 100-year anniversary of the Einstein theory of relativity.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. We even had one of the Einstein books that was in space and came back to Canada. Exactly.
And the Weizmann Institute, Elaine and I have funded a chair in MRI research, brain research at the Weizmann Institute. So these are amazing. Look, we were unbelievably impressed with the Weizmann Institute when we visited it. We were invited to Hebrew University. We saw the originals of the Einstein papers, the theory we touched, albeit behind plastic, the papers, his working papers on the theory of relativity. So we've been spoiled to some degree, being welcomed there in such an amazing fashion, seeing it through friends who seeing it for the first time, accompanying Prime Minister Harper's delegation. These are very rich experiences, and I'm very, very grateful to have had them, and really an amazing thing. And I'm delighted that we were able to have that expansion. Of course, everything is now put somewhat on hold as we work our way through the pandemic.
So I guess that really moves me to the philanthropy that you're involved in, and I know that your personal contributions demonstrate that you and Elaine are really fulfilling what I describe as the Jewish mitzvah, good deed of tikkun olam. I've talked to you about that. And examples of that have been your mission to Haiti after the devastating earthquake that hit the country in 2010, but also the array of scholarships for students, which I referred to at the very beginning. I just want to talk about that and those values, because I think it comes from some of the things you just talked about.
Yeah, no, look, some of the things we did first at Air Canada, one of the principles that I tried to convey, through this, dynamic of mentoring next generation, mentoring some of our leaders, discussions we have in our executive committees and so on and so forth, is that our objective is that if you can do well financially, then you should also be capable of doing good, number one. Number two, that, an expression that I use, which I learned at Stikeman Elliott, was that you leave the room better. And leave the room better means both in terms of how you've made, given opportunities to people and what you've done. And so, the leave the room better mindset, that went to the, creation of the Air Canada Foundation. It went to some of our, Air Canada Foundation, which is extremely active with numerous children's charities, children's causes for the health and well-being of children. Hospitals and so on and so forth. Flying kids who can't afford it for medical treatment and the like. But we expanded that, and we also participate in something called Dreams Take Flight, which brings kids to Disney World. And then when we created the foundation, it was as a result of one-off things we were doing for humanitarian purposes, and we realized we put it under one banner. And that we did, and I accompanied a mission to Haiti following the devastating earthquake there in 2010. We saw the devastation. We brought back orphans that had been adopted by Canadian families. Adoption had been underway already during the at the time of the earthquake. And it was really one of the most moving experiences of my entire life, and something that I'm proud of. And then Air Canada established a orphanage, and with helped support several organizations over there. It's very complicated to see your way through that. But we also participated in the Syrian bringing some of the Syrian immigrants to Canada when Canada opens its doors in 2015, 2016. And there's a little bit of a PS story to that I'll tell you in a minute. But basically, Air Canada was on the front lines of doing flights to places that we never flew before, complicated circumstances. You'd see families being torn apart, where part of the family was coming on board the aircraft and part was staying behind. And we got to know these stories, and we got to see it, firsthand. And coming to a foreign land where you don't speak either English or French, and trying to start all over again, similar to what I was describing, in terms of my parents. Yeah. So, those are very, very fulfilling and things that make me proud, which I know will stay long after I'm gone. The Air Canada Foundation is now an organization. We formed that, 8 years ago or so, and it now will remain, and it'll continue to do good for kids. And humanitarianism has been sort of built into our DNA, the DNA of our organization, and I know that will remain after I retire. Yeah. So these are all very positive directions. As far as Elaine and myself, it's interesting. We've made, of course, like so many others, donations here and there for various causes. But then, decided a couple of years ago that we wanted to do something meaningful, really, for the two universities that gave me the amazing opportunities that I've had subsequently, and that being the University of Montreal, as you say, where I had my civil law degree, and University of Ottawa for my common law degree, and subsequently, as you know, I'm the chancellor there. So I decided that we would do something meaningful. I got into discussions with the rector at each university. And nothing resonated with me. It wasn't a question of having a room named after us or a building or something like that. That wasn't what that didn't mean anything. And when we this is why this conversation is very very good in terms of this point in the discussion. We decided that it was going to be to benefit first generation Canadians, either kids who've come from other countries, who've immigrated from other countries, or children of immigrants from other countries, that their parents have come and they're born in Canada, but their parents were immigrants. And then we decided that we would pay for their entire education, not just the first year, which was a big debate, that it was for their entire education, first year, second year, third year, fourth year, if there is a fourth year, that we'd open it to all faculties, medicine, law, arts, sciences, psychology, whatever it is, architecture, engineering, whatever it is, that we wanted diversity. We didn't want it only to be people of one religious group or another. We didn't want it to come only from one country. And then we had the amazing privilege a few nights ago, last Friday, of having our first Zoom session, a session like this with the first scholarship recipients at the University of Montreal. And Wonderful. The first one that was on the list was a young lady who came from Syria in 2015. Wow. And she is in medical school. She works at a retail store 5 days a week because she and her sister have to support their single mother. And she is in medical school at the University of Montreal. And so there were a few others, also great stories. But the connect the dots part of this is that some of those Syrian families that we brought back, one of them is now a student in medical school at the University of Montreal and is a Rovinescu scholar there under that program. So
that is fantastic.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah, and I think that this is, again, another message that we learned. And we learned this from a very good friend of ours. And Rosalie Jukier, of course, is on the line. I know that because she's, of course, there with Lewis. But one of the people that Rosalie and I know very, very well, John McBain, did an amazing thing for McGill University and is now the chancellor at McGill University. And I had a great conversation with him shortly before we decided on our scholarships. And his advice was to go deep rather than broad on if you want to make a meaningful contribution in this area, go deep rather than broad. And we've certainly been adopting that mindset to the way we look at life.
You've certainly done that. And we're also so proud of you here in Ottawa, of you being the chancellor of U of O. As a past chair of Carleton University, there's a very close relationship and it's a strong one. So we certainly recognize how special, first of all, how the two universities work together. And I know you've been working harder at some of those initiatives as well too, Calin. So, I mean, what you just touched on really is there's such sensitivities. I do want to just mention that I'll never forget our time together in Romania 4 years ago, when you received your honorary doctorate from what must be described as really the MIT of Romania. And I saw where you lived and where your parents had worked. And we walked, you remember, for hours. And you recall glimpses of your childhood past in Bucharest. And I should add that while you were meeting with the Romanian prime minister, and it's amazing because you have met with many prime ministers and presidents of countries over the years, but there I was. I went to the Jewish cemetery with Elaine, and we walked from one Rovinescu family gravesite to another. And how unbelievably remarkable a coincidence that your maternal grandmother's grave was only several steps away from the graves of Elaine's grandparents. Anyways, and I just, that journey, I mean, you speak of these things, you speak of people, and obviously the impact, and you're absolutely right, the impact on individuals rather than maybe a room named after you, but that comes from those early moments, I think. I really do. And that was part of your journey.
No, look, there's no question. First of all, it is, as we know, a very small world, especially, it became a very, very small world in Romania for Jews, who were around in the, during the Second World War, of course. And that cemetery, unfortunately, many, many more people in that cemetery than there are in the entire country alive today, of course. And so, but yes, no, there's no question that again, you take a step back and reflect on all that, and it is absolutely meaningful.
Yeah. Okay, Calin, opportunities ahead. The next chapter, the flight after February, I could describe it that way. What are the challenges and opportunities that you see ahead? I mean, let's say, what do you see for Canada? Because you've had an incredible glimpse, obviously, in dealing with with the range of issues we're dealing with right now at a very senior political level and beyond. So let's look at Canada, but what do you see it for ourselves on the other side of the pandemic?
Yeah, no, look, so, I generally speaking, I'm an optimist. And so I'm going to try to be as optimistic as I can, but I also want to be realistic. And I think those that have followed some of my public statements, I'm going to be consistent with what I've been saying since the beginning of this. I'm extremely concerned and troubled by many things that I see, both in terms of international response and especially response in Canada. And I think that, here in Canada, we, at least in our industry, and based on what I've seen, and I've been in discussions, I think, as most people know, fairly intimately with many of the leaders, there is a certain amount of I would say, indifference and inertia when it comes to matters involving business and the economy. And that is a really, really, really bad idea. You want to build a recipe for disaster, continue going down that path of inertia and indifference for matters related to business, because the business world, so to speak, are the ones that employ people. And that's how people, whether it's big business or small business, whether it's Bay Street, so to speak, or Main Street, this is who employs human beings, right? Yeah. Yes, there are some people that are employed by government, but government will not sustain the economy going forward. So I'm concerned for the economy because there is a certain disdain, I would say, for business, and a certain lack of attention to working together hand in hand with business to achieve outcomes. So we cannot have inertia. It cannot move at a snail's pace, and it cannot be indifference. And you can't look at business as being the bad guys. It cannot be like that. And I do fear that there is a little bit of that is going on. That there's this mindset that business is bad, and whatever it is that we're doing, which is to be dishing money out, relatively in the early days, dishing money out to individuals was a good idea, albeit now we're discovering that it was done somewhat irresponsibly with someone who earned $5,000 last year and receives a check for $20,000. They didn't find that strange as an odd thing. If I only earned 5,000 last year, why should I receive 20? So there were many, many mistakes made in the early days, but you can kind of accept that because those were the early days. But at a certain point in time, someone has to say, we have an economy. Canada is a G7 country. We do need to actually think about the economy. And of course, I personalize it when it comes to our company because Air Canada, total economic contribution to Canada is about $50 billion, which is about 2% of GDP. So I know that how significant we are to small communities, whether it's a Sydney, Nova Scotia, or a Fredericton, New Brunswick, or a Montjoly, Quebec, or Castlegar, or Penticton, British Columbia, small communities, but also big cities, big communities, international, all the international growth that we've had. So it's our industry, but it's so many other industries. It's the tourism sector. It's the hotels. There's a large there's a large chunk of the overall economy that there has to be a much, much, much better collaboration and dialogue that I have thus far failed to see. Yeah. Now, where do we go with all this? The pandemic, the vaccine will not be a overnight panacea here. There's no question. It simply will not. It is logistically difficult to roll out. In order for the world to have, and there was an interesting article this past weekend, in order for the world to have herd immunity, you have to have something approaching 75% of the world vaccinated. And that's not going to happen this year. Let's be clear. So the world doesn't miraculously, people who believe that are somewhat Pollyannish in their views, and that the world gets back to normal by the summer of 2021. I think we have to be very vigilant, but we also cannot be irresponsible. Vigilance, does not mean blanket restrictions the way we've had. We've changed nothing, in our industry when it comes to quarantine rules, travel restrictions, U.S.-Canada border, Atlantic, provinces being shut down. Nothing has changed since March, despite the fact that we know a lot more, from a science perspective. So, A, you can't be Pollyannish. B, blanket stuff doesn't, it's not the answer here. And you have to have a much greater collaboration and interface with, those who are actually creating the jobs, creating the prosperity, creating the investments, paying the pensions, et cetera.
Calin, I can't agree with you more. I so agree. And we have these conversations often about what more needs to be done. So February is approaching. You're going to be certainly busy on the two outstanding boards that you'll be on, BCE and the Scotiabank boards. What else do you see? And I really do hope that your voice is loud and clear, because we need that voice. Sitting here in Ottawa, I do know we need more voices from business, and especially from you to continue. So let's hear after that. And we're coming to the end, so this has been fantastic. But that'll be the last question for you.
There's one board that is that trumps the other boards. I should tell you, I'll disclose that, full disclosure here. It's the board that is board of directors that's created by my two grandsons, who are 3 years old and 5 months old. And that board of directors is an activist board. It keeps me on my toes. It doesn't. That board does not give me much leeway. I can tell you the board fees, the board benefits are quite substantial, however. I look forward to be able to continue benefiting from that board as much as I can.
Those are the best dividends.
Those are the best dividends. Yeah, the dividends are significant from that board. So they're going to take a certain amount of my time, and I certainly expect that to be the case. But look, I expect to continue to be involved and have my voice heard in the business community, both in Canada and internationally. It's been I've been privileged, through Air Canada to have been exposed, Star Alliance and IATA to countries and organizations and airlines all around the world, and I certainly intend that to continue. We'll stay involved, but it'll be different than the day-to-day responsibilities of having something that is so all-consuming and something that has made me very, very proud. And again, part of running a good business is knowing when it is time to move on, and knowing when it is time to empower others to take that responsibility. So this has been something that's been in the works, and I extended it a little bit because I wanted to be there for the full year of this COVID response that we've had to have this year. But look, I intend to stay involved with in one fashion or another with the business community beyond the two boards. Stay involved with the academic community through the university, and stay involved with philanthropy, and we'll keep everyone posted as developments occur.
Wonderful. Calin, and I'm looking forward to us and our families having more time together too. All the best. This was wonderful. I so enjoyed this. I'm looking forward.
Great conversation. You're a good moderator. And look, if I know that Peter Mansbridge is off the air, but I think that if you were doing this in the days of Peter Mansbridge, he probably would have lost his job.
Thank you. Listen, this is 40 years now that I'm just in law, so maybe there's room for something else after this, Calin, too. Listen, God bless. You be well. Take care. We'll see you. And I'm on to Louis. Louis is going to say the last words here, which is not unusual that Louis gets to do that, because Louis was also in our first year on that first day of law school at University of Montreal in 1975.
Louis is frozen.
There you are.
Jacques, I have to agree with Calin that you were really a great moderator. Wow. I have been organizing talks at the Shore for a very long time, dating back to the mid-1990s. And I have to say, tonight's conversation has been particularly gratifying. That's because, aside from being excellent, outstanding, Jacques and Calin are old dear friends. We became friends some 45 years ago when we found ourselves in the same law school class, and they and their wives were at my wedding to Rosalie some 38 years ago. Our friendship has endured all these decades, and what binds us together is our witnessing our children growing up. True. We share a precious history, and for the three of us, family is critically important.
So true.
I want to leave with some insights on Calin. A wonderful TED Talk of David Brooks with 2.9 million views is entitled, "Should You Live for Your Resume or for Your Eulogy?" The talk is based on Joseph Soloveitchik's classic, The Lonely Man of Faith, where Soloveitchik postulates that there are two sides to our nature, which he calls Adam 1 and Adam 2. Adam 1 is the creative achiever who seeks to build on his strengths, works extremely hard, craves success, and becomes the great CEO, scientist, or innovator, the makings of a great resume. Adam 2 is more humble and seeks connection, community, and love, values that make for a good eulogy. Adam 1 asks, what can I do? Adam 2 asks, why am I here? These two sides of our nature, Soloveitchik explains, are in great tension. Calin, I believe, bridges the two Adams to a remarkable degree. He works obsessively hard and became the renowned and incredibly successful CEO of Air Canada. But he also has considerable warmth and charm and a genuine love of people, which makes him a devoted friend and a wonderful family man. One of the things that Jacques, Calin, and I share are the wonderful women we married. It's so true. I know what keeps Calin grounded is his wife, Elaine, his children, Laura and Lee, their spouses, and his two grandsons, who he just spoke so beautifully about. It has been wonderful to witness this special conversation between two great friends, and what a fabulous way to end Tuesday Night Learning for 2020. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Lewis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you, Calin. God bless. Be well. All the best.